Everybody, welcome to This is Real Talk with Mary Grace. We have a special report today. Joining us once again for the fourth time is our friend and just esteemed guest of the show, Sam Faddis. He is a retired senior CIA operative, and he's coming to us today with some amazing updates on things that are happening on the home front here, courtesy of China Joe Brandon. And we're going to jump right in because we have a limited time today. I already made him laugh, so he's lost his composure, and so we're just gonna jump right in. The burning question on everybody's mind right now is, of course, there has been a sort of a volley back and forth over the weekend of some questions regarding the laptop, Jack Maxey's integrity, things like this. And you're the first one who Jack called when he got the laptop. For those of you who are just coming in, I'm going to refer you to the previous 3 episodes of our special appearances with Sam Faddis, because we want to get right into the heart of the issues today. I definitely recommend you go watch those. He explains so much about this situation and others in particular. So as far as the laptop goes, we're hearing reports, or we're seeing a lot of, let me just say, for those who aren't familiar, the individual who runs the shop in Delaware where Hunter Biden took the laptop originally, his last name is Mac Isaacs. This man came forward just recently and said, I don't think there's any way that Jack Maxey could have recovered what he says that he did, because of the limitations on the size of the hard drive. He came out and said that. Jack rebutted. A couple of other people have rebutted. You published an article this weekend on And Magazine. And can you just give us the rundown of where we are with that now? I put your credentials here in the chat or in the window so people can see it. Yeah, so what's actually going on with that?
Well, look, first of all, I'm not going to pretend to be the technical guy that can answer these questions definitively.
Okay.
People have jumped up and made accusations, and it's been a number of people from all sorts of different angles claiming that basically when Jack says that he and his team have recovered a whole bunch of files that Hunter, or we assume presumably Hunter, believed he had deleted, that when Jack says he recovered that and in the quantity he did, that must be garbage. Those are lies. He made this up, all this stuff. So the article we ran in Magazine, we reached out to a guy who I have known for some time, who is a very senior, very experienced IT guy who's done a lot of work for the intelligence community and other entities. And I didn't make any effort to edit that and substitute Sam's dumbed it down technical knowledge on that. We just basically put an intro and an exit and printed precisely what he wrote word for word. So I refer everybody to that as the definitive technical response, which this piece of which is when these deleted that these files essentially, when they're sitting there in this deleted format, occupy much smaller amount of space on the hard drive somehow than they do when they are expanded again. So in any event, the technical issues, I would say, read that article. There is no technical issue, and anybody who's raising that is not really, either doesn't know what they're talking about or is not focused on the right things. The second thing I would just say is this. Jack Maxey, in my opinion, his integrity is completely unquestioned. I have a copy of the hard drive. I've seen the hard drive. I was maybe the first guy he actually called when he got a hold of the laptop to come in and take a look at it. And his first question was, I want to know whether I'm looking at something real. In other words, he didn't just jump into this with both feet and say, hey, this is a great story. Let's just run with it. From the very first moment, it was like any journalist with integrity. Do I have something real? Can we validate this? At every step of the way, the answer to that is yes. So in the end, much ado about nothing.
Right.
Nobody's making anything up on the laptop story.
And one question I have, because this has come up over the past couple of days, I just want to ask you, because you're an attorney, you also were the Assistant Attorney General in the state of Washington. That's a little tidbit we haven't really covered. But chain of custody. Some detractors have brought up the idea that from, the minute, really the minute it left the laptop, the shop, um, the minute Jack touched it, the minute anybody else touched it, it would be compromised, or they could add to it. Can you just address that? Address that argument about the validity of what could be coming out now? How likely is it that Jack could have fabricated, or anybody could have fabricated a bunch more stuff
Yeah,
that,
you could make up all kinds of stuff and stick it on the hard drive, and it would be virtually instantaneously recognizable as having been recently fabricated by virtue of all sorts of data that's associated with it. Look, here's what I think is going on. First of all, I think there are people out there who are acting with malicious motives. They are now very concerned about the fact that stuff that Hunter was worried enough about to delete may now see the light of day. So all of a sudden, once again, we have people throwing mud saying, oh, this is a fake. Okay,
yeah,
we heard that song a year and a half ago.
okay,
And then there are some folks who I think are well-intentioned, who frankly have just become so jaded, they don't know what to believe anymore. And they're kind of willing to entertain any conspiracy theory on earth at this point. And I get it. And I sympathize with that, because I think we all live in this world where so many things we were told were true have turned out to be lies.
yeah,
But you feel like you're a little bit adrift, right? Like, what should I believe anymore? And okay, I understand, but stop with the conspiracy theories. Maxie has a copy of the hard drive from Hunter Biden's laptop, and he's going through that, and he is recovering deleted files. I will add this, which you and I haven't even had a chance to talk about, just talking to him yesterday, I guess it was. They have now identified amongst those deleted files, zip files, which I think most people are familiar with. When you download software, it comes in a zip file, and basically you sort of open it and unpack what's inside.
yes,
What they have discovered is that these zip files are password protected, and some of the passwords contain up to 100 characters. So these are incredibly complex, high-end passwords. And then when they succeed in defeating a password and open the zip file, what they find is that within it, there is another zip file, another layer of encryption and password protection. So we don't know what that means. Maxie doesn't know what that means right now. They're working to crack these passwords in succession and get to it. It suggests a couple of things. One is Hunter Biden didn't do that. I'm just going to tell you, when you look at the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop and look at what his life was, Hunter's not capable of doing this. So somebody did it for him,
right,
or created that. Let's put it this way: somebody else created this. And secondly, it of course raises the question of what is it that is so sensitive within this laptop, which already includes all kinds of incriminating junk, that you would employ this level of password protection and all these layers of encryption. So
right,
bottom line is, we don't know the answer to that question yet. Maxie doesn't know the answer to that, but he's working
okay.
right now to get at it.
And for those people who are saying, okay, release it already, what Sam just explained should explain to you and make it clear to you that Jack Maxey has no interest in just doing a dump for the sake of his reputation or satisfying the internet. What he does have an interest in is preserving national security, preserving the integrity and dignity of the victims who are appearing on this laptop, and doing the right thing. One question I have about that, I kind of suspected that the content on this drive or this laptop was put there by outside actors. Can you ask Jack if they can detect remote access timestamps or incursions? I think that would be interesting to see if they can trace who had remote access, because I'm guessing that one of the things that happened when Hunter was high was that he was just, opening up his laptop to whoever was remotely logging in, or when he was in the room with the hookers, that they were accessing his laptop and opening it up to whoever was remotely accessing. That's just my thinking. I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but thank you for
Yeah.
explaining that. I do appreciate, yeah, but yeah, ask him that if they can track it. It does make sense though to me that they found files that have that level of security. It doesn't surprise me at all. Um, so okay, well let's move on because I think that we have a lot to talk about today. If you're on Rumble, you probably saw our title slide over there, but we're looking at some crazy things that have happened recently. Just in the last week, a story came out, and you guys reported on it over at And Magazine on Substack. And this is that there have been two terrorists who suspected terrorists who've infiltrated Department of Homeland Security. Not only that, but they have gotten into the inner circle of a number of Secret Service agents in DC at the Washington Naval Yard. This is, I think that's where the vice president's residence is as well, right? The observatory, it's near there. So this is kind of a big deal. Can you just walk us through where we are in this story, the backstory, and then where we are today? Because you had another development on this today from the U.S. Attorney. Tell us what's going on in Washington.
Yeah, so let's try to break this down without getting too lost in the weeds here. We got two guys. One's name is Shir Ali Haidar, and the other guy's name is Aryan Tahirzadeh. Tahirzadeh is an Iranian name. I don't know that Tahirzadeh may actually be a U.S. citizen, but ethnically Iranian, apparently. The other guy, Ali, I think is actually, based on the latest information that I've seen, is actually probably originally from Bangladesh, what used to be East Pakistan, so on the east side of India. These two guys were living in an apartment complex, in an apartment. They actually had multiple apartments that they had access to in an apartment down in the Navy Yard, which has once upon a time was a pretty rundown section of Washington, D.C., but in the last X number of years has become very upscale.
Yeah.
A lot of professionals live down there, and the rents are not cheap. These guys were representing themselves as being, well, a variety of things, and some of these stories are inconsistent, but at the heart of this is that they were somehow or another agents for the Department of Homeland Security. They were doing some sort of investigation connected to January 6th. They were high-speed, low-drag investigators, yada, yada. And in this building where they live are a bunch of individuals that also work for the government, including a bunch of Secret Service officers of various types.
Neighbors, how did they know? Yeah.
Well, the whole building is pretty much probably filled with government employees, and there apparently are a whole bunch of law enforcement types, to use the term just very generically and expansively, down in this building. In any event, these guys are down there, these two individuals, throwing around a lot of money, doing a lot of entertaining, giving gifts to these Secret Service agents, asking a lot of questions. At least one of the Secret Service agents is on Jill Biden's protective detail. Some of these Secret Service people are apparently uniformed officers. Secret Service also has uniformed cops, if you will, at the White House gates and so forth, in addition to the plainclothes protective details. But a number of these individuals are members of protective details. And so this eventually blows up, comes to the attention of law enforcement. The FBI is involved. The FBI surveils the apartment for a while, surveils the building for a while, and then they eventually go in and search, I think, 5 separate apartments in this building. And what they find is not just are these guys not Department of Homeland Security agents, and have been lying about a whole variety of things, but they find a whole lot of very, very troubling stuff in the apartment. So they find a whole bunch of equipment which is designed for breaching. In other words, breaking open locked and secured doors and gaining entry to place you're not supposed to gain entry to. Equipment for fabricating false ID cards. They find drones.
Oh.
So you can do surveillance with those. They find apparently vehicle tracking equipment, which basically means you're putting trackers on vehicles and then remotely you can track where they go. They find a bunch of handguns, I think at least one rifle. They find a spotting scope like you might use for a sniper team. They find a whole long list of things. We itemized a lot of this at the end.
So
So they find,
is this, can I just ask, if they were DHS agents, are these items that a DHS agent normally would have in their possession?
well, first of all, I don't know exactly what the heck they mean by DHS agents, because
Okay.
most of the people that work for, I mean, Department of Homeland Security is kind of an umbrella organization that was thrown over top of everybody and his brother, the Coast Guard, Federal Protective Service. So it would depend on what they were doing.
Okay.
It'd be very hard to believe that they would have most of this gear in their residence. Like you know what you're doing for your job, you might have it, but why it
Okay.
would be lying around in your closet at home is another thing, right?
Right.
You can go to the home of a guy who belongs to Delta Force and probably shouldn't find most of his gear for his day job sitting in his closet at home, right? But
Got
in
it.
any event, these guys don't work for DHS, never did work for DHS, and that whole thing is a lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here, I mean, I'll tell you what really bothers me about this, and there have been several documents by this point filed by the federal government. The Iranians have back 2 years ago when Donald Trump was president of the United States, we staged a strike and killed a guy named Soleimani. Soleimani was head of the Quds Force, which is basically the arm of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps that works abroad, stages terrorist attacks, does things of that nature. Ever since then, the Iranians, about every 5 minutes, have made a public declaration that they're going to get revenge in spades and they're going to kill a senior U.S. government official or officials. I mean this to the point where they published a video, which was them using CGI killing President Trump on the golf course in Florida. They have literally announced this over and over, and they have a very robust terrorist capability. So now all of a sudden you have the one guy, Ali, has made multiple trips to Iran, and there are entry and exit stamps in his passport showing that he's gone in and out of Iran. And the location where he's gone in and out of Iran happens to be a training camp for the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps where they train foreigners. Now, that's a large city. There's a lot of other things that happen there. So the fact that he went to Mashhad, Iran, does not equal I am saying I know he went to an Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps camp.
Sure.
But it is yet another piece of evidence against this backdrop that all of a sudden you have a couple of guys who really want to get close with Secret Service agents to the point that they're shelling out money. They got a bunch of gear they shouldn't have. That to me is exactly the kind of gear you would use in preparing for a terrorist attack. And all of this is going on against the backdrop of the fact that the Iranians have for at least 2 years been saying they are going to kill somebody in spectacular fashion on U.S. soil.
Supposedly in retaliation for the journalist, right? Is that
in retaliation for us killing General Soleimani, who was the commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps? So a lot of the sort of, we'll call them mainstream press, not really satisfied with the term anymore, but we know who we're talking about, seem to want to just write this whole thing off as a couple of weirdos who were grifters and con men, and we don't know what they were up to, and it doesn't reflect very well in the Secret Service. But again, kind of nothing to see here, no big threat.
interesting?
Well, a couple of things don't sit very well with me. First of all, these guys, let me lay out several things. First, I don't trust the Biden administration as far as I can throw them. They are in Vienna right now negotiating with the Iranians for yet another Iran nuclear deal. And as part of that deal, everybody knows that one of the things they're considering doing is removing sanctions on the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, taking them off the terror list, and basically letting them go about their business.
Yeah.
It would be really embarrassing to the Biden administration if it is found out that while they're getting ready to tell us that the IRGC is not a terrorist group, it is suddenly discovered that IRGC operatives are in Washington, D.C. planning an assassination. So, in other words, there's every reason for leftist media to want to downplay this story.
Yeah.
Second, you can call them con men and grifters. Clearly, they were to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that's part of the intelligence business. But here's the thing. These guys weren't getting anything from anybody. They weren't conning other people into giving them money or presents. They were the ones laying out the cash, giving people weapons, doing all kinds of stuff. So if you're a con man, it's kind of supposed to work the other way around. You're supposed to be somehow getting something from somebody. So in terms trying to build this, in other words, as a financial thing, I think is it doesn't make any sense. There's some other things that bother me from a tradecraft standpoint, by which I mean having done this kind of work for a very long time. The FBI set up surveillance on the apartment in advance of raiding the place. That's pretty normal, because they wanted to see who came in, who else came in and out before they told these guys they were onto them. Okay, that's professional. These two guys made that surveillance, by which I mean they determined they were being watched.
Okay.
Now, I could say some really not complimentary things about the quality of FBI surveillance, but all kidding between the CIA and the FBI aside, the FBI generally knows what it's doing, especially on U.S. soil, about conducting surveillance. So if these two guys detected they were under surveillance, that at least suggests the possibility that somebody had trained them to do that, because that's an art and you have to know what you're looking for. When they were detected as under surveillance, when they realized they were under surveillance, they began to mail out of the apartment incriminating objects. In other words, they knew they were going to be raided and they wanted to get rid of things. And they knew they couldn't start walking out of the apartment while they're under surveillance carrying boxes, because the guys surveilling them will see that, right? So, but they are smart enough to know that they can mail things out of the apartment.
So how do you think they made the surveillance? How did they figure that out?
Well, I mean, that requires a lot of training. I mean, the first thing is you have to understand how surveillance works and how they set up, and it doesn't work the way it works in TV, where a guy follows you 50 feet behind you on the sidewalk all over town.
With a newspaper.
With a newspaper. It's one guy who watches you all over town. You have to understand how many people do that, where they set up, how they rotate, how they move with you, a whole variety of things you have to be trained to do. So unless you're talking about really, really horrible, blatant surveillance, that suggests that these two guys had been trained, or at least one of them had been trained. When they do this analysis, then they determine they're going to mail packages out.
Yeah.
This again shows, well, at a minimum, it shows that they're smart and they have the capacity to think through this. They don't panic. They don't start taking stuff out and trying to throw it in the Potomac or something. They mail it out of the place to another location, but they actually mail it to a Secret Service officer.
That probably the best choice.
Probably not the best choice, but it suggests that they thought they had co-opted this guy enough that he would keep his mouth shut. He didn't. He turned in the stuff they had received. Okay, so that's at a minimum, this action is smart. It also suggests the possibility, again, that you're talking about people that have been trained to deal with these situations. They know what the FBI is going to do. They know what they can get away with. They know they're not searching packages coming out of the building, blah, blah, blah. Here's another really troubling thing. The things they mail out include a bunch of plastic firearms cases. If you've ever bought a firearm, typically you get it from the gun dealer, say a handgun, and it's in a small plastic, almost Pelican type case, usually with foam padding inside. And they are different for different firearms. They're manufacturer specific and often model specific. So the cases that they mail out of the apartment there are several, I think 3 or 4. And they're for 3 or 4 handguns that were not found when the apartments were searched. In other words, when the FBI finally raids the place, they found X number of firearms. I want to say like 4. These cases that these guys mailed were for firearms that have not been found. They were not in the apartment. Why am I making a big deal about that? Well, first, because that suggests there are at least X number of handguns floating around somewhere that we haven't found yet. Since the FBI presumably can do a thorough search of the apartments in the building, they're not hiding in there somewhere. That means there's another location.
So is that a safe house?
That means suggests very strongly to me that there's another safe house. Also, why of all the things they could mail did these guys choose to mail those weapons cases? Because they knew that those firearms weren't in that apartment anymore. And they knew when the FBI found those firearms cases and couldn't match them to guns that they were finding, that that's exactly what it would say to the FBI. There is another location someplace else where other weapons are still being stored, and who knows what else. So that's exactly why these guys chose, from an operational standpoint, you walk through this, that is exactly what you would do. If they find these cases and they can't find the guns for them, they will know immediately, the Bureau will know there's at least one more safe house, and they will go looking for it. We can't mail these things to that safe house because we can't take the chance they'll intercept it.
Right.
We can't go to that safe house ourselves. This is called compartmentation, right? In operations, you seal things off. We're blown. This location's done. We're done, but we're sealing off any connection. So this is, to me, again, this is getting down in the weeds on operational stuff.
Sure, no, this is
very, very troubling, right?
Yeah.
These guys, by virtue of choosing these items to mail, are saying, we don't want you to know there are other firearms you should be hunting for.
Right.
We don't want you to think there is another location. And
yeah,
frankly, we don't know that at that other location there aren't other personnel as well. We don't know there's only two of these guys.
Okay, that was my next question. Do you think that they were planning on leaving this location? And from what you're saying, it sounds like maybe they were gearing up to just walk out the door and not come back. Is that what they would do when they've been made?
Well, look, if they were made and they were in a position to get away, to exfil themselves, is what you would say in the business, then presumably they would do that if they could just simply cut and run. My suspicion is that by the time they realized they were made and that surveillance was sitting on them, that they realized, well, we don't have that option. I mean, I cannot physically get out of this building without the FBI seeing me, at least not, I'm not sure I can. We're going to get wrapped up. Right now, our focus is not on us. Our focus is on sealing off the rest of the op. When I look at everything they found in the apartment and the totality of the information, if I was involved in this investigation right now, I would say, number one theory, you have an Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps op, let's just say Iranian, because there may be multiple agencies involved from the Iranian side. And these guys, the job of these guys is to do what we would call the casing for that operation. Their job is to identify the target, identify the movements of that target, and acquire the data that it would allow you to create the plan to go kill somebody. Their job is to name a person, Jill Biden, or some congressman or senator, whoever the heck it is. How do they move? Where do they go? Where is the opportunity to kill this person? How can we build a plan? And then what would happen typically with the Iranians would be these guys would go away and another team would come in who would be the ones who would actually carry out the attack. These guys would just vanish one day, and another team using the plan that they created would come in, carry out the attack, and then hope to also vanish and be gone.
They would take a responsibility or not. I mean, depending on what message they were trying to send. Right?
And then the Iranians as a nation would do, take responsibility, claim credit or not, depending on political considerations. But these guys, to me, don't look to me to be the team that is supposed to be identifying the opportunity where they want to make a big splash. So who is it? What's the idea? What are we doing? Are we blowing something up, shooting somebody, kidnapping somebody? What's happening?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, like I said, then you formulate the plan, and then to use the language that any somebody not in the business would use. Then the hitmen show up, right? Then the
Right.
then the
Right. Yeah.
then the assassins come to town after the plan has
Okay.
been written.
Interesting. So you use the term fix uh, with regard to the potential target. Um, that's an industry term for, you said they would fix the target.
Did you say fixed? I'm sorry. Did
Yeah,
you say
they would
fixed?
use the term fix. Um, yeah, we're getting a lot of interference. um, what's going on right now. I don't know if you hear it. I can hear tons of interference in the background. Sounds like something's pressure
I
washing.
am not hearing that. I am not hearing that on my end.
Okay, I'll see what I can do over here. All right, keep going. So, yeah, I just thought that was an interesting term, but
Well, look, so
yeah,
from again, this is one of these horrible, horrible subjects where when you get into it, you end up using a bunch of really cold, calculating, antiseptic terminology.
yeah,
It's like when we start talking about weapons of mass destruction, you're talking about means of dissemination and all this junk, and you're like, stop and think. You're talking about killing millions of people here, and you speak like this is using language like a frigging accountant. But I mean, this is how, in the business of espionage, you would break this down and think about it. And when you're talking about trying to stop the other side from doing this, that's the way you have to look at it. Yes, you would look at a target, and this is not a Hollywood thing. You don't want to get into a gunfight in the middle of Washington, D.C.
right,
You're not planning on just starting a war and then hoping you can shoot your way out of it. Ideally, you identify your target, you identify and then find the opportunity that allows you to hit that target, and using whatever means, and the means is adjusted to what the target is and what the operational environment is. So is that an explosive device? Is that a rifle? Is what is that? And you're looking to fix them in time and space. If this attack has to be planned in advance, and I don't want to get lost in writing a primer for bad people, but if you're looking to do this, you have to do a lot of preparation, which means you have to be able to predict in advance where and when the target will present themselves. So you're looking to fix them in time and space. Where is that opportunity? You hear a lot, if anybody who's watching this who's ever been trained in counterterrorism, hears a lot about varying times and routes and things like that. And which is a defensive mechanism to try to prevent people from being able to predict where you will be and when you will be there. So everything I'm seeing from these guys, where they're gathering information, they've got scopes, these kinds of things, vehicle trackers, all of this fits with, you're trying to map basically the movements of potential targets,
okay,
and you're looking for that person. You're looking for that opportunity where you can say, every Tuesday at 10 a.m., Senator so and so goes and has coffee with his mistress at this cafe. And that's the weak point, and that's where you can get rid of him.
okay, wow. Um, so one of the big questions that you raised in your, I don't know where this noise is coming from, it's really loud. Um, one of the one of the big things that you raised in the article was the financing. These guys were living rent free in a penthouse apartment. They were throwing money around hand over fist. And if a DHS agent, they might have a good salary, but not a penthouse salary, right? Um, and then of course all of this very high end gear that you're talking about, weaponry. Uh, do they? Does the prosecutor, does the attorney, have the U.S. attorney, have they come out with any guesses as to how this group is being funded? Who's funding them?
Well, the only thing that I've seen is that they have acknowledged that they're looking into the possibility of connections to Iran. I mean, this is back to the point I was making before, right? You can try to write these guys off as grifters, but this is all inside out, guys. Grifters are supposed to be scamming money out of other people. They're not laying out cash. These guys are laying out big chunks of change. Even the handguns that they're playing with are all top of the line, $1,200 a pop handguns, and they've got scopes and breaching equipment, and they're buying rifles for people. So somebody is putting some significant amount of money into this. Tahirzadeh has said that it's Shir Ali. It's this guy, Haidar Ali, that the money's coming from him, and he claims he doesn't know where it's coming from.
Right, of course.
Okay, well, look, guys are going to turn on each other, and if they're out of the two at this point, if I got to make a call on who's the pro, the guy who's actually been trained, it would be Ali, who has traveled back and forth to Iran, and the Tahirzadeh is the guy he's recruited locally, and Tahirzadeh doesn't want any part of going down for this, so
okay,
he's probably the weak link and the guy who's going to cut Ali away at some point. But obviously, he's not sitting there while Ali is coming up with thousands and thousands of dollars, and he has no idea where it comes from, and he never asks. Right? This is another common sense thing. Like, seriously, you never bothered to ask the guy where he's coming up with all this money. That's dumb.
Yeah. And the Secret Service agents, apparently they weren't really concerned about it either. They were probably enjoying the fruits of the largesse of these guys, right? Except
that's a bad that, by the way, I mean, that's obviously that's a bad reflection on them, right? I mean,
yeah,
as I said, the Iranians have about every 5 minutes, that's obviously a little bit of an exaggeration, but continuously for 2 years said that they have every intention of coming to the United States and killing somebody senior. And as an example of how senior they're thinking, produced a CGI video showing them killing Trump with a drone.
yeah.
So if you're on the Secret Service in Washington, D.C., you ought to be aware of that. And you ought to have some counterintelligence consciousness. And when guys are buddying you up and buying you rifles and asking you questions about what kind of firearms the Secret Service carries,
Yeah,
somebody ought to have thought, this doesn't smell good. Let's check these dudes out.
yeah, it's amazing. And isn't the Secret Service, don't they have the capacity to run background checks? That's what they do. I mean,
Yes.
I can't go to the
Yes.
White House without submitting my information to the Secret Service. You can't go. That's just standard, right?
100%. Not
Okay.
to mention that in their personal conduct, the Secret Service ought to understand, they presumably ought to be briefed on this and trained on this and
Yeah.
understand, look, people are potentially going to buddy up to you to gather information.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's like sort of like 101 training, right?
It is exactly 101 training.
Okay. Yeah. So this is just it's crazy because I mean this story is still under investigation. The U.S. attorney Joshua Rothstein is the attorney on this case in D.C. I'm just getting some information here about this. Federal prosecutor on Sunday said that the investigations are still uncovering disturbing new information following last week's arrests. So that was on Sunday. And you reported on it this morning. Is anybody else besides And Magazine reporting on this story?
Not that I know of. Look, I said I kind of touched on this earlier, but let me just repeat this because I think it bears repeating. I am not saying that I have the definitive answer, like the investigation's been conducted. And what I am saying is that if I'm still operational and this is my bailiwick, and I'm looking at the data that you have right now, what I'm going to be saying to folks is we're going to work on the hypothesis right now that we have a potential terrorist attack in the making. Number one suspect, the Iranians. You got 2 guys in custody. You have no clue how many guys there are. Just because you arrested 2 does not mean there are only 2 guys in this team. You busted 1 location. You have no idea how many locations there are.
Yeah.
There could be 10 more guys and 5 more locations, and the plan could already be in motion. So anybody who thinks they're going to sleep for the next X number of days or will get around to eventually get in the bottom of this, forget that mentality, man. You got to run this down right now. Now, if it turns out in the end that that is wrong, That's good news.
Yeah.
But we're not going to find out tomorrow that somebody gets blown up down in Washington, D.C., and we've been sitting on leads for a week that could have taken us there and prevented that. That's the only way you can work in the field, right? We got to move. We got to be ahead of these guys.
How confident are you in the FBI's ability to follow this through to the best conclusion?
Not very. And the reason I hesitate is because, look, the men and women of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, allowed to do their jobs and properly led and motivated, can they run this down without question? Do they have the competence, the professionalism? Do they have the leadership right now to do that? That's my hesitation. I mean, I
Yeah.
believe, as I said earlier, that what you are seeing is something where we are deliberately being. You asked me who else is covering this. Well, like nobody, because we're deliberately being fed this narrative that, yeah, this is weird, but it doesn't really mean much.
And why are we being delivered that narrative? You mentioned to me earlier your guesses about
because if this because for political purposes, if you demonstrate that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, Iranian intelligence, whatever combination, is prepping to kill somebody inside the nation's capital, at the same time Joe Biden is surrendering to the Iranians in Vienna, that is yet another political disaster for an administration that's already wobbling around. So we got to downplay this, man. In other words, politics is more important than saving lives, preventing a terrorist attack, anything else. That is my fear. That's exactly what you're seeing.
So really just saving face, actually saving the nuclear deal that Barack Hussein Obama started with the Iranians in 2015. President Trump put the kibosh on it in 2018. Then he killed Soleimani. And now that they got their people back, their person back in, it's time to pay the piper. That's what you're saying, that they're cashing in on a deal that was stopped by President Trump. The deal is now back on because they.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, this could play multiple ways on the Iranian end. First of all, in Iran, not everything is every decision is necessarily made by one single central authority. There are multiple power centers in Iran. So you could have the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps proceeding with a plot to kill somebody at the same time that other elements of the government are not on board with that. You could also have the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps planning an assassination op with the idea that they will turn it on or off depending on what happens in Vienna. You go write multiple scenarios. It doesn't change the fact that if it turns out we got Iranian operatives on our soil preparing for an assassination or a terrorist attack, that, while the president of the United States is getting ready to tell us that the IRGC is not a terrorist organization and sanctions should be lifted and they should be taken off the terror list. That will be a scandal of the first order, right?
Yeah.
The first priority from a law enforcement intelligence perspective should be, let's take the politics and shove it out of the friggin' room.
Yeah.
We got a real possibility that we have an impending terrorist attack on our soil. Maybe it's supposed to take place in 6 months. Maybe it's supposed to take place next Tuesday. We don't know. So nobody sleeps until we know the answers to every question associated with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that the Chinese are involved here? I mean, there's obviously a partnership with China and Iran. How connected do you think this is?
Well, I mean, the Chinese and the Iranians have an ever closer cooperation on a whole variety of fronts. I wouldn't fall over dead in surprise if you found the Chinese had assisted them. I don't think the Iranians need their assistance. The Iranians have been carrying out terrorist attacks on a massive scale all over the world for many, many, many years, very successfully. And I have encountered them in Lord knows how many places. conducting just this kind of thing. They are very sophisticated boys and girls. They know exactly what they're about. They are very capable of killing people in large numbers without anybody's help.
So what we're looking at here in terms of this administration, the resident in the White House, that we're looking at least two levels, not levels, two different directions of extreme compromise. The Iranians, they're wanting to cash in on a deal that was tabled under Trump. And of course, we know that Joe is extremely compromised, basically owned by China.
Yes.
So we have two different factions that have a considerable level of influence over the White House. That's what I'm concluding here. And neither one of them is American, right?
Yeah. And we have something. I mean, if you read the U.S. Attorney's documents, you've referenced them, these memos that have been submitted so far in support of holding these guys in confinement, which is critical, by the way, because if they're trained intelligence personnel and you cut them loose,
they're gone.
Well, the chances that they're gone are very good. I mean, that's part of the gig, right? Is to figure out how to get away. The language that's used in those memoranda that have been submitted by the U.S. Attorney is, I don't know if inflammatory is the right word. It's strong. They're not making any effort to downplay this at the U.S. Attorney's office. They keep saying in black and white in these documents, every day that goes by, we find more and more stuff, and it is very alarming and it's very dangerous. And they say over and over, we regard these two as a major threat to national security. So at least in this case, the U.S. Attorney is focused, and hopefully the FBI is moving with the same kind of speed and energy.
But what we have to hope and pray for is that the chief law enforcement officer of the land does not call a stop, does not tell them to stand down. Correct?
Yeah, and this is why my really long pause before when you asked me about confidence in the FBI. It's not trying to say anything snide about special agents in the Bureau. We have seen over and over at the level, this incredible corruption on the part of folks at DOJ and the FBI. And we have seen people just lie outright. I mean, in Benghazi, men died, and an ambassador was killed.
Yeah.
And the administration came out and just lied bald-faced to the American people about what had happened. And they knew that they were lying. I know multiple people that were on the ground in Benghazi and Tripoli when this all happened. I know exactly what happened because I've talked to them on multiple occasions. And I know that what the administration said the next morning had happened bore no resemblance whatsoever to anything that either CIA or the Department of State reported to Washington, D.C. D.C. knew precisely what had happened from the first moment, and then made up a fairy tale to tell to the American people the next day and lied about everything. So that's a U.S. ambassador being killed and other U.S. personnel being killed, and they don't bat an eye at lying to the American people about it. So they will absolutely lie. You can absolutely imagine somebody at the top lying about this, just saying, hey, we decided there's nothing here, move on. Definitely not an Iranian thing.
Yeah. I remember that. I mean, most people do. And I remember, when I heard about that and I saw, the new people, Susan Rice going around the news circuits, I looked at the person I was with and I just said, this is a lie. This is not what happened. And I was just living out in Hawaii surfing. I knew enough to know that it was a complete and total lie. And so, the American people are just so done with this kind of thing. And,
yes,
I'm encouraged to see the U.S. Attorney actually taking this seriously. That does give me hope. And the fact that our law enforcement officers in the FBI actually set up their surveillance and, got to the point where they identified these people, that gives me hope. I'm extremely discouraged by what the behavior of the Secret Service agents. Just that's crazy. So, what's the biggest threat to our national security right now? if you could identify like one thing or one person.
Well, I mean, look at, if you're talking about the nation like on a strategic level, there's no question that it's communist China, right? I mean, and 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 um, and the horrible thing about the Chinese threat is that I always say that the Chinese have figured out a long time ago. And by that, when I say the Chinese, obviously I mean the Chinese Communist Party. This is not an ethnic
Yeah.
thing. This is the people that suffer most under the CCP are the Chinese people themselves. The Communist Party figured out a long time ago that the real weakness of a capitalist system is greed. So they have sucked us into an economic relationship with them, and there are Americans at the top who are getting richer than anybody's ever been in the history of the world off of this horrible economic lash up with communist China, where slave laborers in China produce stuff to be sold to Americans who can't afford to shop any place other than the dollar store anymore. But at the top, you have these people just getting fabulously, fabulously wealthy. And so the Chinese have figured that out. So when I say that, why is it so horrible? It's not just because it's inequitable and unfair, but because what it means is that our policy, our so-called elite, the people that hold the power, have basically been co-opted by the Chinese. Even if they haven't been like formally recruited, they're just in bed with them to make money. So nobody wants to get tough with the CCP and push back on them, because they're all starting with people like Nancy Pelosi making boatloads of money off of doing business with the Chinese.
Yeah. Mitch McConnell, Diane.
All of them.
Yeah, so many of them. It's just crazy. And that there's another topic we wanted to touch on today, and I think we'll have to pick this up on another show because we're going down to the wire here. You have a hard stop in about 8 minutes. Um, we we're looking at a disaster of unprecedented proportions with the fentanyl that's coming into this country, and who's responsible for that. Can you just give me a little tell the listeners what's going on right now with that?
Well, so most people are probably familiar with the fact that fentanyl is a drug. It's a synthetic drug, right? It's not made like from a plant like opium and heroin. It's made in a lab. And the way the fentanyl trade works is this. The Chinese produce all the precursor chemicals. So they produce all the ingredients to make this stuff. It all gets shipped to Mexico. It gets sold to drug cartels. They cook the stuff. They have factories. They manufacture fentanyl out of the ingredients the Chinese get them, and then it gets moved across our border in industrial scale quantities. Fentanyl is almost insanely lethal. Like like a speck of this stuff is enough to kill you. It is this year, last fiscal year, the federal government seized. So this is just the stuff they captured. Lord knows how much actually came across the border. They seized enough fentanyl to kill every person in the United States 7 times over. That's how lethal it is. Fentanyl overdose is now the leading cause of death in the United States of America for people between the age of 18 and 45. So everything else, cancer, car accidents, shootings, no. More people between 18 and 45 die of fentanyl poisoning in the United States every year than any other cause. And it is everywhere. DEA has a nationwide initiative that they have ongoing to focus on problem areas. Like it's 11 of the worst places in the United States for fentanyl poisonings. You look at that list, you remember there's like an old Johnny Cash song where he sings, "I've been everywhere, man." And he rattles off all these names of quintessential American cities everywhere. When you look at that list, that's what you're looking at. It's like Kalamazoo, Spokane, Washington, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So this is not, Spokane has had in the last year, I think, a 1,000% increase in deaths from fentanyl.
Is it?
People they're stacking. Literally in Baltimore, the morgue ran out of space. They had to bring in commercial coolers, put them in a parking garage to stack bodies like cordwood. I am not kidding. Of hundreds of bodies that they can't get to process yet. And why? So you got China produces the chemicals.
Yeah.
The cartels cook it, and Joe Biden makes sure it gets across the border and into your kid's body. That's how this
They're
works.
doing this on an industrial scale, so we're not talking about mules bringing it across in their underwear. We're talking about tractor
Yes.
trailers.
Yes. We're talking, well, first of all, relatively small quantities are incredibly lethal. But yes, this is a huge industrial scale enterprise, and it is there is a group pushing. We wrote an article on this in And there's a group pushing now to have the United States formally declare this a weapons of mass destruction attack on the United States, because in effect it's a chemical attack by the Chinese in league with the drug cartels. And I guess Joe Biden's part of the alliance. And you think about the amount of time and energy the United States right now is spending on making sure your kid needs to wear a cloth mask still somewhere at school for something that ultimately amounts to a bad flu season. But this they won't touch. In fact, Joe is now moving to open the border even wider so even more fentanyl can come across.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. You know, I wish that you could stay with us longer. I think the listeners also wish that. We're just getting in the comments here, just, you know, the people just love listening to you, Sam. It's so informative. I learn something new every time. And I just, I'm so grateful that you're here. I really feel like we need to make this a regular thing. I hope you'll come back.
Happy to do it.
Yeah, this is just fantastic. Everybody who's in the chat, Sam Faddis, retired senior CIA operator. He has been in the field. If you're worried about his credentials and what side he's on, he is on Team America. You can go back to the first episode that we did and listen a little bit more to his bio and his credentials. And I think you'll be really assured if you haven't figured that out by now. He can be found on andmagazine.substack.com. He is also on Twitter and Getter under Sam Faddis. And you definitely want to follow him. I recommend that you subscribe to his Substack, because that is where you are going to get these updates and articles. He's a frequent publisher there on the magazine. He and his wife founded the magazine, correct?
Yes.
So I thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for taking part, for all that you have shared with us. And we'll definitely look forward to these updates. We're very grateful that you and your team and also Jack Maxey are just on the front lines. We need more people like you. So really appreciate you. Is there anything you would like to close with here? Got 3 minutes.
No, one of these times you got to have me on and we get to talk about something happy, like, I don't know, like puppies and rainbows or something.
Bouncy castles.
Bouncy castles. There we go.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah. I had Michael Yan on. We were talking about food shortages, and then we shifted gears and started talking about SpaceX. So that was kind of fun.
There you go.
Yeah,
There you go.
do
Well,
stuff.
Jan can be a depressing dude too sometimes.
Believe me, yeah. The first half of the show, people were like, "Oh my god."
Yeah, we're all going to starve to death.
Then we managed to flip him to the fun side because he's really fun.
He
But
is fun.
yeah,
Good.
so
And a good American too.
very good American. Yeah. So I'm very grateful that we have, you know, people of your caliber and of your principles and integrity really on the front lines here. It definitely gives me more peace of mind. Sam, his last name is Faddis, Faddis. It's right here on my screen if you want to take a screenshot. And Sam, we will just definitely look forward to having you back. And thank you again so much for being here. Everybody, please share this, tag, follow the page, and send this into groups. Make sure people get this information. It's so important for people to know what's going on. And you're getting this information right here, right now. Somebody's asking in the chat, is Jack Maxey still safe? Yes, he is. He's in touch with Sam on a regular basis. But continue to keep him in your prayers. This is a pivotal week in the development of the laptop with Jack Maxey. So continue to pray for them. Thanks again, Sam. Appreciate you here, having you here. Take care.